Customer service, done right, can be your company's single biggest competitive advantage. Welcome to the Customer Service Revolution. Join customer service authority and best-selling author John DiJulius as he interviews leaders who are revolutionizing their industries. This is more than a podcast, though. It's a movement. The Customer Service Revolution is a radical overthrow of conventional business mentality designed to transform what customers and employees experience. If you're a revolutionary customer service leader who's ready to stop competing on price and obsessed with building a brand that people cannot live without, this podcast is for you. Hello, revolutionaries. Welcome back to another episode of the Customer Service Revolution podcast with John DiJulius. How you doing, John?
Fantastic. How are you, Denise?
I'm fabulous. Thank you. Thank you. Nice sunny day here in Cleveland today.
Yes, I'm not traveling this week, and it's a perfect week to be in Cleveland.
Yay. Yay. So, got any best practices for us this week?
Yeah, something that came up, it always comes up, but I was at, we're doing a big project with Sandals Resort, and this applies to every single business, but we were there and checked in the night before the workshop and went to the beach and saw a beautiful sunset. And you're just, you're thinking about it. But what it made me think of is Sandals doesn't own the sunset, right? The resort, the beach, the blue water. And you can get that, I'm assuming, at hundreds of Caribbean destinations. So there's this expression I love. I think it should be a theme for companies, whether for the year or for the quarter, called URX, and it stands for You Are the Experience. And in every business, B2B, B2C, the last 15, 20 years, it's been about the digital revolution. And we have an app for that. And you get it off our website and you can check in online, or you can check in self-service kiosk. You can check out at a self-service kiosk. And if you are a brick and mortar, look at this beautiful facility we built, and the cappuccino machine and the chandelier, and all those things are important. But I believe as leaders, we've sent an unconscious message to our staff that it's not about them anymore. And so you go back to the Sandals, which really brought it back, is their competitive advantage is not the beautiful sunset, the beach, and the water. Dozen different restaurant choices you get on property, and the 9 pools you get on property, because you're going to get that at any comparable resort. But it's about them. And, technology and equipment and all that stuff, build a rapport, show empathy, make a brilliant comeback if you drop the ball, but the employees can. And that's what I just think we've been missing. Like even me as a entrepreneur in my businesses is, I feel like we get away from that and talk about our technological advances. If you make a Uber and Lyft apps black and white, you can't tell the difference between them. So the technological advances are the easiest to replicate. If you're a competitor and you come out with something technology, I can replicate that, but I can't replicate your people, your culture, your experience as easy, if at all. So I just love that expression. Is URX. You are the experience, and as leaders, we have to go back to putting the emphasis and back on our employees and make them feel part of it.
What's the best way to do that?
Remind them. With AI, with technology, the human interaction is less and more fragile. And we really have to capitalize and crush it when we do interact with someone, and be engaged and be present, and the whole list. What we're going to talk about today.
And what are we talking about today, John?
Relationship building.
Yay. That's a hot topic for sure.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's so important?
Well, kind of what I said earlier, it's not common. It's something that we don't have, right? Our people skills have rapidly declined in every generation, and businesses have to own this, unlike they ever have before, in new employee and ongoing employee training.
And what does that look like?
Well, so a lot of people think this is about the younger generation. And again, every generation, my generation, your generation, which is different. It's
different than yours? Wait a minute.
It is. We're 6 a year apart. And you're not a boomer.
No.
I am. I'm the youngest of the boomers, which I don't know if that's something to brag about. No, but like us older folks, whatever you want to call it, our people skills have declined. But you do have 30 and under that are relationship disadvantaged and no fault to their own. And, besides improving our every generation's people skills, you can't skip this new workforce because the next one will be further behind in people skills, in those soft, critical skills. And so, it's on companies to make it a critical part of their training.
You brought up relationship disadvantaged. How would you define that?
Well, that you and I, they're the first generation to grow up strictly on iPhones. They didn't transition, at 12 to iPhones, iPads, all social media. That's the only thing they've known. And so we've talked about this before. They went to school during the pandemic. They didn't get the inherent people skills besides the things that the social media and iPhones and iPads strip them of. But, a lot of them are coming out of college, graduating and working from home, which is just a horrible setback for their critical people development years, that they're not working with people. They're not going out to happy hour. Happy hour, I just was reading online literally today that happy hour is toxic. They view happy hour as toxic and almost canceling it. I didn't read enough to see why, but it's just, happy hour was so much fun for us just to go hang and see people in a different light, and instead of just, working with each other or for each other. Relationship disadvantage. They just don't have the inherent people skills that we were forced to. But through my experiences and, all three of my businesses, we have approximately 100 employees that are 30 and under, and they are rock stars once they're trained. Like, it wouldn't make sense to me. I think they're better than the previous generations who weren't relationship disadvantaged.
Do you think any of that has to do with them being not just great training, but working with people in person, that they have face-to-face jobs?
Yeah, definitely. That helps. And that makes it scarcer because a lot don't want face-to-face jobs. And that's what you have to find out, which is another topic, is those people skills that can't be trained. Do you enjoy like others? There's a lot of people that don't, and there's nothing wrong with that. We can't give them 10,000 hours on that and get them to like others.
Right. I think there are some people too that think they don't want a job around people, but in reality, when you work remote, when you work by yourself all day, you're missing something.
You are. I mean, there's advantages, right? I always say
The energy of other people.
Yeah, collaboration, vulnerability, all those things. I loved the advantage of work from home when it first came, because I felt like you got a 25th hour in the day because of the commute time. But God, I miss the collaboration. I miss the Keurig conversation. I miss peeking in your office, bouncing an idea, and all of a sudden that takes us down a rabbit hole. But all these great ideas come out of it, and it may have nothing to do with the first question, or it may have, asking someone when you're waiting for them to, get their coffee at the Keurig thing, how was their weekend? And you find out something bad or good happened that you won't find out in the out of sight, out of mind. There's just so many things of that loneliness. I mean, loneliness is part of the relationship disadvantage. It's going through the roof.
And do you think it's just young people being affected?
No. Every generation has reported all-time loneliness. And you can see on the opposite side, the older generations, they're not out typically going to bars and all that. And, they're empty nesters, literally maybe empty nesters if they're single again. That happens. But every generation has reported, and it all goes back to social media. It does. And I love social media, but it's certainly, someone said it today, I heard on some podcast, it's not the attention economy, it's the addictive economy. And Scott Galloway said on his podcast, that he shouldn't give no one under 16 should be allowed to have a cell phone. And I do agree with that. I'm sorry, a smartphone, because you're, giving someone, I forget how he said it, access to porn, a casino, and he listed, 8 other things that you can get off your cell phone and that are negative. So yeah, I agree. But
I think it's difficult to understand what reality is when you're buried in a cell phone, a smartphone, social media apps.
What if you had access to the secrets world-class companies know that enable them to deliver a consistently great customer experience? The DiJulius Group believes some secrets are better shared. That's why we created a framework that divulges what world-class companies know in a simple, easy-to-follow system. Get access now by enrolling in the Customer Experience Executive Academy. Visit cxea.org or email Claudia@thedijuliusgroup.com for more information.
yeah, and I said this on a previous podcast with you that the majority of 18 to 24-year-old, at least male, have never asked a girl out in person. And I asked my son, Bo, who's 22, if that was true for him. And he said 100%. And I've asked his friends. I think one of his 3 friends said, I had asked a girl out in person one time. But those are people skills. That translates to sales. That translates to making friends, because I realized I was obnoxious in that, the first take. And don't do that when you don't know someone, or whatever it may be. But, they don't have those opportunities to build.
Yeah, it makes it tough to work on your emotional intelligence when you're buried behind something like that. So, you know what? I wonder how many, even over the age of 25, 35, 45, now that there are so many dating apps online, what percentage now still don't or don't anymore ask someone out in person?
Yeah. And again, I heard this on a podcast. I don't know if this is age related. It may not be. 90% of the women on dating apps swipe right. I think that's the positive. Swipe right on only 10% of the guys. So there's a couple things there, right? There's 90% of guys that are lonely, depressed, discouraged, lower self-esteem. And you got 10% there getting 90% of the, that doesn't make for a good guy.
And what percentage of those are real profiles?
Right. I don't know. I don't know. But yeah, just all these things. I mean, because you're just looking at your requirements, right? Your checklist, 6'2", this, that, whatever. So
you did a TED Talk a while back about meet as strangers, leave as friends. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that kind of was the inspiration for the book, The Relationship Economy, Building Stronger Human Connections in a Digital Age. And so meet as strangers, leave as friends is really the whole thing that we're talking about here, that I believe, and I've never had anybody disagree with me on this, there's no greater skill that any of us can work on a daily basis that will have a bigger impact in our personal and professional lives than the ability to make a meaningful connection with others being strangers, friends, acquaintances, coworkers, clients, neighbors, you name it. The challenge with that is it's not taught anywhere. It's not taught at home. I gave my kids iPads to occupy them so we could do whatever we had to do, right? And it's not taught at home. I've never heard, or maybe there is, I'd love it, I've never heard of a class that teaches it. Definitely not a degree. So the only place it can be taught is in businesses, because you're not going to hire people with the necessary service aptitude skills that you need if they're going to be in any, you could say customer facing positions, but if they come in contact with other human beings, if they come in contact with coworkers, if they come in contact with vendors and don't have pleasant people skills and they're annoying and don't know how to ask for something and don't know how to make a relationship. So that's really what, that whole TEDx talk was about.
Okay, which is a great point. So you don't learn it at school, you don't learn it at home, you're learning it from your employer. How does an employer best teach that?
Yeah, so make it a mandatory part of new employee orientation and ongoing. So, first thing we got to teach ourselves, our employees, our kids, is everyone we come in contact with has a invisible sign above their head that says, make me feel important, right? You do, I do, the UPS driver does, everyone does. And so, what does that look like? And Stephen Covey one of his famous quotes is, people don't listen with the intent of understanding, they listen with the intent of replying, right? And that's so true. And I'm guilty of it, and certainly have been. And so scientists studied the human brain, and they found that it took the human brain a minimum of 0.6 seconds to formulate a response to something said to it. And then they studied hundreds, thousands of conversations and found the average gap between people talking was 0.2 seconds. So we're responding in 1/3 the time our brain will allow us. Right? That's impossible. And the only way we could be doing it is if we're having a conversation, I have what I'm going to say next ready. And I'm just waiting for you to come up for air so I can jump in, hijack the conversation, and get it back on my favorite topic, which is me, right? So, there's a huge difference between listening and waiting for your turn to talk. And I think too often we're guilty of just waiting for our turn to talk.
So it sounds like texting might be a better option for you.
Yeah. Well, I found my best option is being on stage with the only one with the microphone, and it's not a dialogue for 90 minutes.
So making connections is important, and I think we're all aware of that. How do you know if you're truly making a connection with someone?
Yeah. So I love asking audiences this. How many people in here you feel that you're really good at making a connection with someone you haven't seen in a while or have never met? And obviously 80% of people raise their hand. And to a certain degree, they may be right, but I call bullshit. And, I say, just because I sat next to someone on a break and we chatted up for 20 minutes, it doesn't mean I made a connection, because high probability I was talking about myself for 20 minutes. We're all genetically coded to be preoccupied with what's going on in our life. And that's a hard urge when whoever you are, on break, at breakfast, wherever, at work, and you say, hey, how are you? And I tell you, oh my God, my flight was delayed last night and I got in so late and I had to, get up and, and then the AV check was a disaster. And Bo got in trouble again at school. And, I don't know what I'm going to do with Bo. And, did you hear that, so-and-so might be leaving the company? And so the best thing in that, we've probably one of the top things we've ever come up with at the DiJulius group that is universally used by every client of ours and people that aren't clients that have read the books or listened to the podcast is, if you want to prove to yourself that you built an instant rapport with someone in a 3-minute conversation or a 30-minute conversation, you have to focus on learning 2 or more things of the other person's Ford, F-O-R-D. And if you learn 2 or more things of the other person's Ford in that conversation, you not only built a rapport, you own the relationship, because each and every one of us, our own Ford is what we geek out about. It's what we get excited about. We start talking fast, and all those. So you want to ask me the obvious question? What is Ford? I didn't say what Ford is yet.
I thought you said what it is.
No.
I swear, I thought you said family, occupation, recreation, dreams.
Wow. You're just so used to hearing me. You heard that. Yeah. Family. F for Ford. Family. Are they married? Do they have kids? How old are their kids? What activities are their kids into? Sports, grades, blah, blah, blah. Occupation, right? What do they do? Who do they do it for? How long they've been doing it? What's their title? What's their company's name? Our recreation, right? What do they like to do with their free time, weekends, vacations? They're in the pickleball fad. They, are cyclists. They do yoga. And then D is dreams. What's on their bucket list? What's their encore career performance? And it doesn't have to be like a stalker checklist. It depends on the situation, especially in business, right? If I'm coming in to buy a cup of coffee, I don't think someone should, hey, are you married? Do you have kids? But there's so many times that in business or just really the client overshares. Oh, you're dressed up. You have a big day. Yeah, I have a board meeting I'm going to, or a big sales call, or my daughter's graduating today. And customers overshare, whether it's that or they're trying to schedule an appointment and you're like, all right, how about Thursday? And they're like, no, Thursday, then my daughter is, graduating, or her soccer team made it, the districts. And you capture that, and then you can use that or pass it along to someone else that will be using it. So yeah, Ford is the greatest tool ever. The best example of Ford that I've ever seen is a little 20-second clip by actor Charlie Day. You know Charlie Day?
Mhm.
What was he in? He was in Horrible Bosses. I know I've seen him in other things.
Yeah, I was going to say he's been in more than that.
But this is his commencement speech, a 20-second clip. But this is what Ford does for you.
When I left the school, I was presented with two options. I could move to New York City and begin my acting career, a city where I knew next to no one. Or I could take the entry-level position that had been offered to me by Fidelity Investments. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why would a major financial services corporation offer this numbskull a job? The answer is simple. Because I tricked them. Merrimack's business program was offering interviews with a company. The students would be given a score on their interview, and I'd never been on an audition. It seemed like it would be a similar experience, and I liked the role of aspiring banker, or whatever they do with the game plan. Deflect from me. Get this guy to talk about himself. I wasn't going to lie. I was just basically going to interview him. If I recall correctly, we talked at length about the intricacies of water skiing, an activity I know nothing about. Now, had the man asked me what 8 times 7 was, there would have been an unbearable pause in the room. But he didn't. And the interview went so well that he offered me a job.
Had you heard that before?
Yes.
Yeah. Let me get back to this. All right. Yeah. So I love that. I mean, that's all it takes is focus on the other person and, they're going to like you. So, something that's funny or, when my theory is when we're dealing with clients, you want to keep the focus on you. Now, you obviously have to share something about yourself, or there, but I think too often it's 90% of where we focus and not the 10%, right? But I also think it's a great self-absorbed meter that when you're out, and this has happened when we've gone out with couples and I didn't, know the husband, or I've been on, a plane and I, chat up the guy next to me and I'll Ford them to death and find out everything. And they love talking. But after, 45 minutes, if you came in and asked them to tell you one thing about me, they couldn't tell you one thing. Right. And that just tells me that, that's probably not someone I want to build a personal relationship with.
I think part of that is being curious too.
It's all curiosity. If you ask Tom Peters might have said this, if you ask a question and don't ask 2 to 3 follow-up questions, odds are you weren't listening or you didn't really care about the answer, right? It's kind of like, hey, Denise, how was your weekend? And I have no idea what you said. And I'm like, do you want to know what I did? And, it was just an entry to tell you about my weekend, my exciting weekend that I'm sure yours doesn't compare to, right? So, yeah, I mean, that's what Ford is teaching people in a professional setting how to be curious, how to, go to that subconscious of, well, you wouldn't believe what's going on in my world, and keep it about them. And now you got the jewels on them. Now I know what your hot buttons are. And, my boys, they always knew that if I saw them talking to an adult, they knew that they were going to be quizzed on. We've forwarded the Uber driver. We try to find out who can find out the most personal information of an Uber driver. It's a game we play.
Do you recommend companies playing that game?
Yeah. I mean, so that's what we teach. And that's, every company we've ever worked with. I have never come across a company. Let me change that. In brick and mortar retail, Ford is harder if you don't have an appointment in a database, right? If you're coming in just to buy a smoothie or a shirt, a clothing store, or whatever that business model is, and they don't have an appointment, you're not in a database. Yeah, they can't cheat. They can still pay attention and see that you're wearing your name badge from your job, right? That's Ford. Or that you have a shirt that says Hilton Head. Have you been to Hilton? Yeah, just got back, right? Those are obvious Ford. But the brick and mortar have it harder than B2B, over the phone support, because we can all cheat. And if you're an existing client, I can pull up where you're headquartered in Chicago and your last purchase was. So for the companies that have CRM systems, you could answer this as well, because you've been helping people do this over 25 years. I've never come across it where a company can't add Ford to their CRM system. So at the DiJulius Group, we've had 3 or 4 different CRM systems in 25 years, from HubSpot to, or Salesforce to HubSpot to whatever else. And we've all been able to add a Ford field that we can run a report. We can pull up before I get on the call. The salon, we've had, 2 different salon databases. We have Ford fields. I've never run into a client, KeyBank, to any of them that have CRM systems that have not been able to add a Ford field. And now you can, if you want, it's a good best practice our clients have done when they're launching Ford to get everyone in a habit, is they can run a report and say, Denise, you had 15 meetings this month, because from your calendar, and you only updated Ford on 5 of them. That's once it's added to, your fields, you can run reports like that. But more importantly, Lindsay could be talking to someone who's my admin. And now when I have my first call, or Claudia, when she's selling it, and now we have our onboarding call with the CEO and the company, I can see that, anything that she's caught besides whatever else we find out.
Any other ways you see people incorporating Ford?
Yeah. I mean, there's, I think KeyBank and a lot of our clients have Ford pads, desk pads. And you might think that's a little redundant if they have it in their CRM system, but I have found out the hard way, you don't want to be typing live and trying to update, because I'm usually 5 to 7 seconds behind. So I might be like, all right, Denise just got back from Scotland. So I'm typing that in, but I got to keep the conversation. All right, Denise, you got any plans for this upcoming weekend? As I'm typing that she just got back from Scotland, and you're like, yeah, my aunt died and I have to go back to Florida, and and I'm still typing, she just got back from Scotland. I'm like, oh, sounds great. I'll have fun with that. Having Ford pads is more of a primer to remind me to focus, to hear, to she just said. And Zoom is great because, you could see a lot of things in people's home offices or business offices of degrees and vacations and pets and whatever else that may be.
You often talk about there being a gift in every conversation. Can you elaborate?
Yeah, if you're looking for it, if you're paying attention, and these gifts, so to speak, take 30 seconds, right? So, all right, Denise, client Denise, all right, let's we'll have a call next Wednesday, same time, like we do every week. And you might say, no, next week I'm on vacation. Next week I'm, going to an education thing. If it's vacation, where are you going? You're going to Charleston. You ever been there? No, never been there before. Where are you staying? Right. And those little things come up, or my father's having surgery. I mean, these are all unfortunately things that come up, or my daughter's graduating, and you just record this. And so the Ford gift can be just a simple link to the best biking trails in Charleston, because I know that's your recreation, or the top restaurants in Charleston, or I follow up, that week and just say, hey, Denise, I hope the surgery went well for your father. Oftentimes people forget that this was, how did he know, or whatever. So, that it's just paying attention to those things. Or it could be a great article that I read, I wrote, whatever, of something that you're having difficulties with at work. And it's like, Denise, you mentioned that, and here's a great Harvard Business Review article that I think you'll enjoy. And it takes 30 seconds. So that's a gift in every conversation.
Love that.
Yeah. Doesn't cost anything.
You have, and you've shown this before, I think, but I think it's worth sharing again. A little sign on the side of your
monitor.
Mm-hmm. What does it say?
UAIT. It's actually my word of 2025. It just, it stands for, obviously wait, but it stands for why am I talking? And I don't know if I'm the minority or everyone suffers from this, but I get so excited when I'm talking to someone about what I do for a living, and they're telling me about their customer service challenges, that I constantly interrupt because, we just did that and it worked out great. And I'm so excited to share, and it's horrible. I'm interrupting. And so now I try to tell her about what we did with, Schneider Electric when she's done, and I'll bring up this. And then when you've gotten everything off your chest and transferred the burden from you to me on the challenges, the unique challenges your company industry possess, then I cherry pick it. And so often 3 of those things weren't that important. Like there'd be no time to discuss it. But, I really found out what was majorly important. And this is how embarrassed I am by this. So I was at a client's location a couple weeks ago, and we were going out to dinner after the workshop. And so we were all waiting, I think, in the hostess area of this restaurant, and the executives were there. And someone came up to one of the executives and told them, and he needed to either ask or inform another executive there. And so I kind of got that. I was close enough. Someone come up, whispered, he goes, "Oh, I'll tell him or I'll ask him." And then the person he needed to ask was involved in a conversation with another executive. So and he just waited. And my mind was like, what's wrong with him? Like, why is he waiting? Why did he just say, "Excuse me, just want to let you know that," or "Denise needs to know." And like, I'm sitting there the whole time, and the whole time might've been 3 minutes. And it was driving me crazy that he wasn't interrupting this person to, but that's why I need that wait sign, because obviously it wasn't something that he needed to interrupt, and it could have waited the 3 minutes, but that was just so against my, whatever. Yeah.
That's hard.
Hard for me. I don't know. Is it hard for you? You don't seem, you're really good at
not interrupting.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean I'm not, I try to calm what's in my head, I guess, because I will have, mine is ideas usually just like ting, 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 ting. And I'm like, okay.
So it goes back to Stephen Covey's thing that you're no longer listening to understand. You're listening to reply with the ideas in your head. And they might have told you something vital.
It's hard to turn those off, though.
Yeah. And it really does help me if I write it down.
Yes.
So tell her about,
It's easier for me to stop having it come out my mouth than it is stop moving in my head, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, but the burden that we bear. I think another difficult thing for people, and I know I have struggled with this myself too, is when someone tells you, I'm going here, I'm going there, you just want to share everything you know about that place. Yeah. And sometimes you have to be really careful you don't one up someone.
You're stealing their thunder.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And it's so easy to do it like with an employee. "Hey, weren't you on vacation last week?" "Yeah." "Where'd you go?" "Oh, me and my family went to Disney for the first time ever." "Oh my God, don't you love it? I've been there 12 times. Thinking that you're, finding something in common, but you've just stole their thunder. And what the hell can she tell you about Disney that you don't already know?
Right. Right. I think being careful of those things is important.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
In conversation.
Yeah. Well, another podcast, I have conversation never and always.
Oh, let's do that one.
Good. Yeah. Yeah.
That'll be a good one.
Yeah.
All right. How about finishing up our conversation today with one of your philosophies from Living an Extraordinary Life?
Yeah. So it's a term I hate. Might be controversial, but I hate the term "I gave my best." When the goal is to accomplish greatness, to do something that no other business person, and I don't care if this is, personally, professionally, a team, sport, whatever it is, if you want to, be the one, in the 1%. I just feel over the years that the term "I gave my best" is this crutch. And once I say it, you really can't say anything else. Like, how can you argue with me? "Well, Denise, I gave my best." And if me and you were to race a 40-yard dash and you beat me,
kick your butt.
I'm sure you would. I have pulled my groin in baseball and a hamstring. So, but you probably would beat me.
And you don't have full use of that shoulder, probably.
Right. But it's not because I'm old. And you beat me. I could easily say, and not be lying, I gave my best in that race, acing the test, closing the sale successfully, running winning the race has little to do with what you did today and more to do what you've been doing the last 6 to 12 months. And maybe in this situation, this fictitious situation, I haven't been training as hard as you, making it, just not feeling good. Got to get home after practice while you stay. And it really goes back to that. We've talked about this in a previous thing, the slight edge. What you do today or you don't do really has no impact on today. And so, it's just if you think of any amazing any underdog that did something that no one in the world thought possible in a sport, or a guy who started a computer company in his garage that a decade or two later became the most valuable company in the world and beat IBM. That wasn't them giving their best. To me, your best is what you were capable of. And that's not what I want. And that might mean you got to get rejected 1,000 times and, let's, go for another 1,000. Knock on doors and call people you have no right calling, but you get them to take your call because you're persistent or whatever it is. So, that's just kind of one of my many pet peeves is, I wasn't asking for your best. I was asking for you to go beyond and achieve greatness.
And on that note, we know what your expectations are.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not fun working for me.
Well, it reminds me a bit of who did we just play? Timothy Chalamet recently, his acceptance speech at the SAG Awards, Achieving Greatness. No, it wasn't achieving greatness. It was
He's in pursuit of greatness.
In pursuit of greatness. Thank you.
Yeah. It's just one of my philosophies and pet peeves that I'm sure the majority of people may not agree with, but I also believe that they are more likely to have different results at the end of the day. And it applies to me more than anyone.
True. Well, thank you, John, for another great episode of the Customer Service Revolution podcast. And we'll see everyone next time.
Thank you. Thanks, Denise. Thank you, revolutionaries.